She knew the moment she walked into that Manhattan boardroom that her past was about to collide with her present. Emma Carter adjusted her charcoal blazer one final time before pushing through the glass doors of Meridian Capital's 42nd floor. Her honey-colored eyes swept across the room with practiced confidence, taking in the familiar sight of venture capitalists in their perfectly pressed suits, their calculating gazes already measuring her worth. 7 years ago, she would have trembled in a room like this. 7 years ago, she was a 23-year-old community college student from suburban Connecticut, clutching a worn backpack and believing love could conquer anything. Today, she commanded attention without asking for it. Emma Carter, CEO of SolarWave Technologies, she announced, her voice carrying the authority that came from building something from nothing. Behind her, Daniel Scott moved with quiet confidence, his engineering mind already analyzing the solar panel prototypes displayed on the presentation screen. His presence was steady, reassuring, like everything about the man who had chosen to love her when she thought she was unlovable. The investors nodded with interest as Emma launched into her pitch. SolarWave wasn't just another green energy startup. It was the result of sleepless nights, rejected loan applications, and the determination of a single mother who refused to let her daughter grow up watching her fail. Our pilot program in Rochester schools has reduced energy costs by 63%, Emma continued, clicking to the next slide. Her wedding ring, a simple platinum band Daniel had slipped onto her finger 2 years ago in their backyard with only Lily as witness, caught the light as she gestured. She was mid-sentence, explaining their expansion plans, when the boardroom door opened. Time seemed to slow as she registered the familiar silhouette, tall, impeccably dressed with that same golden brown hair styled to perfection. Ryan Blake stepped into the room like he owned it, which, knowing his family's investment portfolio, he probably did. Their eyes met across the polished conference table. For a heartbeat, Emma was 23 again, naive and hopeful, holding a positive pregnancy test with shaking hands while the man she loved told her she was ruining everything. She remembered the coldness in those dark brown eyes when he'd said, "This isn't what I planned, Emma. This isn't who I am." But that heartbeat passed. Emma's spine straightened. Her honey eyes hardened into amber steel. She didn't miss a beat in her presentation, didn't stumble over a single word. Instead, she spoke with the voice of a woman who had built an empire from the ashes of abandonment. Ryan took a seat at the far end of the table, his gaze never leaving her face. She could feel Daniel's subtle shift beside her, protective, alert, ready to shield her from whatever storm was coming. As you can see, Emma concluded, SolarWave represents not just an investment opportunity, but a chance to power America's future. She clicked off the projector and smiled the smile that had closed million-dollar deals. Any questions? Ryan's hand slowly rose. And in that moment, Emma realized her carefully constructed world was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The silence in the boardroom stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Emma's fingers remained steady on the remote control, though her heart hammered against her ribs with a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. Ryan Blake's raised hand seemed to hover in the air forever, a ghost from her past demanding acknowledgement in her present. "Yes," she said, her voice betraying nothing of the earthquake happening beneath her composed exterior. Ryan leaned back in his leather chair, that familiar, calculating expression settling over his features. He looked older now, lines around, his eyes that hadn't been there 7 years ago, a hardness to his jaw that spoke of too many board meetings and not enough genuine laughter. "Impressive numbers, Ms. Carter," he began, and Emma noticed how he emphasized her surname as if testing whether it still belonged to her. "But I'm curious about your long-term sustainability model. How do you plan to maintain growth when larger corporations inevitably move into the residential solar space?" It was a legitimate question wrapped in a challenge. Emma recognized the technique. Ryan had always been skilled at making business feel personal, and personal feel like warfare. Daniel shifted almost imperceptibly beside her, his engineer's mind already formulating responses. But Emma raised her hand slightly. This was her fight. It had always been her fight. "That's exactly why we're not just another solar company," Emma replied, moving closer to the presentation screen. While our competitors focus on installation, we're building an integrated smart grid system that learns from each household's energy patterns. We're not just selling panels, we're creating energy independence. She clicked to a new slide, one she hadn't planned to show until later in the process. It displayed a complex algorithm Daniel had spent months perfecting, their secret weapon, in a crowded market. Our AI-driven optimization increases efficiency by 40% over traditional systems. We hold 3 patents on the technology, with 2 more pending. Emma's honey eyes met Ryan's dark stare directly. We don't just compete with larger corporations. We make them irrelevant. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. She could see the other investors leaning forward, their interest genuinely piqued now. But Ryan's expression remained unreadable. And what happens when those larger corporations offer to buy your patents? He asked. Everyone has a price, Ms. Carter. What's yours? The question hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Emma felt the weight of every investor's gaze, but more than that, she felt the weight of history. 7 years ago, Ryan had assumed she could be bought, with promises, with lifestyle, with the illusion of love. He'd been wrong then. He was wrong now. Some things aren't for sale, Mr. Blake, Emma said quietly. And for just a moment she let him see past her professional mask to the woman who had learned to value herself when he wouldn't. I believe in building something that lasts, not something that can be traded away when the price is right. Daniel's hand brushed against hers, so briefly that anyone watching might have missed it. But Emma felt the warmth, the solidarity, the reminder that she wasn't facing this alone anymore. Ryan's eyes flickered to Daniel, then back to Emma. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition that made Emma's stomach clench with old familiar dread. Admirable, Ryan said, his voice softer now, almost intimate despite the room full of witnesses. I'd like to discuss this further, perhaps over dinner? The room seemed to hold its breath. Emma felt the past and present colliding like storm fronts, and she realized that some battles were just beginning. I'm afraid my schedule is quite full, she replied, but even as she said it, she knew Ryan Blake had never been easily dismissed. His smile was razor-sharp and heartbreakingly familiar. I'm sure we can find the time. The elevator descended 42 floors in complete silence. Emma stared at her reflection in the polished steel doors, watching her professional mask slowly crack as the floors ticked by. 38th floor, 35th, 30th. With each number, she felt herself fragmenting, the confident CEO giving way to the woman who still woke up sometimes from dreams where she was 23 and heartbroken. Daniel stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring, but she could feel the questions radiating from him like heat from pavement. He knew. Of course he knew. After 3 years of marriage and 2 years of dating before that, Daniel Scott could read her silences better than most people could read words. The elevator dinged softly as they reached the ground floor. Coffee? Daniel asked as they stepped into the marble lobby of Meridian Capital. It was their code, their way of asking if they needed to talk about something that couldn't wait until they got home to suburban Westchester, where 7-year-old Lily would be waiting with homework. Questions and stories about her day. Emma nodded, and they walked 3 blocks through the Manhattan evening to a small cafe tucked between a dry cleaner and a bodega. The kind of place where nobody cared about business suits or stock portfolios, where the barista knew everyone's order and the Wi-Fi password was written on a chalkboard next to drawings of coffee beans. Daniel ordered 2 black coffees. No cream, no sugar, the way they'd both learned to drink it during those early days when they were pouring every penny into Solar Wave's development. Emma found a corner table, away from the window, away from the possibility of being seen. So, Daniel said, sliding into the chair across from her, his blue eyes gentle but direct. Ryan Blake. It wasn't a question. Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep through the ceramic. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, like safety and normalcy, everything that felt threatened by Ryan's reappearance. You remember what I told you, Emma said quietly. About Lily's biological father. The investment banker who left when you told him you were pregnant. Daniel's voice carried no judgment, only the careful neutrality he used when discussing Emma's past. The one who chose his reputation over his family. Emma nodded, unable to meet his eyes. That was him. In the boardroom. Ryan Blake. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, processing. She watched his hands, calloused from weekend projects, gentle from years of reading bedtime stories to Lily, curl around his coffee cup. These were hands that had built treehouses and fixed broken bicycles, hands that had held Emma during panic attacks when the business almost failed, hands that had signed adoption papers making Lily legally his daughter 2 years ago. Does he know? Daniel asked finally. About Lily? He saw us together once, 7 years ago, at a grocery store when she was just a baby. He pretended not to notice. Emma's voice grew harder, more brittle. But today, the way he looked at me, Dan, he knows something. Daniel reached across the small table and covered her hand with his. What do you want to do? It was such a Daniel question. No assumptions, no commands, just space for her to decide. Emma thought about Lily at home, probably sprawled on their living room carpet, working on her science project about renewable energy, using the solar-powered calculator Daniel had bought her last month. Lily, who called Daniel Daddy, and had never asked about the man whose DNA she carried. Lily, who was happy and secure and loved. I want to protect her, Emma whispered. I want to protect our family. Then that's what we'll do. Daniel's thumb traced gentle circles on her knuckles. Together. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming gratitude that still caught her off guard sometimes. The gratitude of being truly known, truly supported, truly loved. Her phone buzzed against the table, a text message from an unknown number, but she recognized the area code. Boston. Looking forward to that dinner conversation. I have some interesting investment proposals for Solar Wave. Emma's blood ran cold as she realized Ryan Blake wasn't going to disappear quietly. He never had been the type to take no for an answer. Nothing prepared Emma for the sight of Lily's crayon drawing taped to their refrigerator door. It showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a crooked chimney and solar panels drawn in careful yellow strokes across the roof. My family was written in purple letters across the top, and underneath, in Lily's neat second-grade handwriting, Mommy, Daddy Dan, and me. Emma stood in their Westchester kitchen at 7:30 p.m., still wearing her business suit, staring at that simple drawing as if it held the answers to questions she wasn't ready to ask. Behind her, she could hear Daniel helping Lily with her math homework. At the kitchen table, their voices mixing with the low hum of the dishwasher and the tick of the wall clock that had belonged to Daniel's grandmother. This was home. This was peace. This was everything Ryan Blake had never understood and never would. Mama, you're being statuey again, Lily observed, looking up from her worksheet with those honey-colored eyes that were so much like Emma's own. At 7, Lily had developed an uncanny ability to read the adults in her life, a skill that both impressed and worried Emma. Sorry, sweetheart. Emma forced herself to move, hanging her blazer on the back of a chair and loosening her hair from its professional chignon. How was school today? Mrs. Patterson said my solar system project is going to be the best one in the class, Lily announced proudly, holding up a construction paper model of Saturn, with rings made from painted cardboard. Daddy Dan helped me with the measurements so it's dimensionally accurate. She pronounced the big words carefully, the way children do when they're proud of learning something new. Daniel caught Emma's eye over Lily's head and winked. She insisted on getting the ring structure exactly right. Wouldn't accept anything less than perfection. Wonder where she gets that from, Emma murmured, but she was smiling as she ruffled Lily's curly hair. The gesture was automatic, maternal, protective, everything that felt threatened by the text message still burning in her phone. They moved. Through their evening routine with practiced ease, Daniel cooked dinner while Emma helped Lily finish her homework. They ate together at the kitchen table, talking about school projects and weekend plans and whether they should plant tomatoes or peppers in their small backyard garden this spring. Normal family conversations about normal family things. But Emma could feel the weight of the unspoken pressing against her chest like a physical thing. After Lily was tucked into bed with her favorite story about a princess who built her own castle, Emma and Daniel finally had their real conversation. They sat on their back porch, sharing a cup of chamomile tea and watching the solar-powered garden lights Daniel had installed last summer cast gentle patterns across their lawn. "He's not going to stop," Emma said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Ryan, he never could let go of things he thought belonged to him." Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering. "Do you think he wants Lily? Or you?" It was a question Emma had been avoiding all afternoon. "I don't know. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe he just can't stand the idea that I moved on without him." "You didn't just move on," Daniel said, his voice carrying that steady strength that had anchored Emma through every storm of the past 5 years. "You built something beautiful. You became someone extraordinary. And that threatens him." Emma leaned against Daniel's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with the faint smell of motor oil that never quite washed out of his hands, no matter how hard he scrubbed. "What if he tries to take her away from us?" "He can't." Daniel's arm tightened around her. "Legally, I'm Lily's father. I adopted her 2 years ago, remember? He has no claim on her, Emma. None." Emma wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust in legal documents and court orders and the simple fact that Ryan Blake had forfeited any right to call himself Lily's father the moment he'd walked away. But she knew Ryan. She knew how he fought, how he manipulated, how he turned everything into a game he was determined to win. Her phone buzzed with another text message. "I meant what I said about dinner. We have a lot to discuss. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., Le Bernardin. I've already made reservations." Emma showed Daniel the message, watching his jaw tighten as he read it. "You don't have to go," he said quietly. But they both knew she did, because ignoring Ryan Blake had never made him disappear. It had only made him more determined to get what he wanted. She almost didn't recognize the woman staring back at her in Le Bernardin's bathroom mirror. Emma adjusted her black dress, a sleek, conservative piece that said, "Successful businesswoman," without saying, "trying to impress," and checked her lipstick one final time. The honey-colored eyes looking back at her were steady, determined, but she could see the fear lurking beneath the surface. Fear not of Ryan himself, but of what his presence might cost her family. The restaurant hummed, with the quiet sophistication of Manhattan's elite. Crystal glasses clinked softly against bone china. Conversations murmured in careful, cultured tones, and servers moved like shadows between tables draped in crisp white linens. This was Ryan's world, had always been Ryan's world, where everything was beautiful and expensive and ultimately hollow. Emma found him at a corner table, partially hidden from the main dining room. He'd always been strategic about visibility, controlling who saw him where and when. Some things, apparently, never changed. He stood when she approached, old-fashioned manners drilled into him by generations of Blake family breeding, and for a moment, she saw him as she had 7 years ago. Handsome, commanding, magnetic in that dangerous way that had made her forget every warning her mother had ever given her about men who seemed too good to be true. Emma. Her name sounded different in his mouth now, weighted with history and regret. "You look incredible." "Thank you." She accepted the chair he pulled out for her, noting how he let his fingers brush against her shoulders as she sat. Some gestures were muscle memory, even after 7 years. The waiter appeared instantly, the kind of service that came with spending $1,000 on dinner without blinking. Ryan ordered wine without consulting her, a vintage Bordeaux that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month, another old habit that made Emma's teeth clench. "So?" Ryan said, settling back in his chair with that familiar look of a man who owned whatever room he occupied. "Solar wave. Impressive what you've built. What I've built with my husband, Emma corrected quietly, emphasizing the word husband like a shield. Daniel and I are partners in every sense of the word. Something flickered across Ryan's face. Disappointment, perhaps, or frustration. Yes, Daniel. The engineer. Tell me, how did you meet? Emma could hear the calculation in his voice, the way he was already looking for weaknesses, pressure points, ways to wedge himself into the life she'd built without him. He was installing solar panels at Lily's elementary school. We started talking about renewable energy infrastructure. Then, we started talking about everything else. And he just accepted her? Another man's child. The question was casual, almost conversational, but Emma heard the poison underneath. This was Ryan testing boundaries, seeing how deep Daniel's commitment ran, whether there were fractures he could exploit. He didn't accept her, Emma said, her voice carrying an edge of steel. He chose her. There's a difference. And she chose him back. Ryan's smile was sharp, predatory. Children are adaptable. They attach to whoever provides stability. But biology is permanent. So is abandonment. The words came out harder than Emma intended, but she didn't regret them. You made your choice 7 years ago, Ryan. You don't get to unmake it now. The wine arrived, providing a moment of tense silence as the sommelier went through his practiced ritual. Ryan tasted, approved, watched as their glasses were filled with liquid that caught the candlelight like liquid garnets. I made mistakes, Ryan said finally, once they were alone again. I was young, scared, focused on all the wrong things, but I've had time to think, Emma. Time to realize what I lost. You didn't lose anything. Emma's voice was steady, final. You threw it away. Did I? Ryan leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Because it seems to me like you kept the most important part. Our daughter. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Emma felt her heart rate spike, adrenaline flooding her system the way it did before she gave a major presentation or signed a crucial contract, fight or flight. But she'd learned long ago that running only worked if you had somewhere safe to go. Her name is Lily, Emma said quietly, and she's not yours to claim. Ryan's smile was slow, dangerous, full of old confidence and new determination. We'll see about that. The appetizers arrived, delicate arrangements of seafood and microgreens that looked like art and tasted like money. But Emma had lost her appetite entirely. She realized with growing dread that this dinner wasn't a negotiation. It was a declaration of war. The Uber ride home felt like traveling through a different universe. Emma pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching the lights of Manhattan blur into streaks of gold and white as they crossed the Queensboro Bridge toward Westchester. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the effort of keeping her composure for the past 2 hours, while Ryan Blake systematically dismantled every assumption she'd had about her safe, protected life. I've been thinking about filing for paternity rights, he'd said over the main course, cutting into his sea base with surgical precision. My lawyers tell me it's a straightforward process. DNA test, establishment of biological connection, petition for visitation, maybe more, depending on what's in the child's best interest. Her name is Lily, Emma had repeated, but her voice had sounded hollow even to her own ears. Lily Blake has a nice ring to it, don't you think? The driver took the exit toward their neighborhood, passing the 24-hour diner where she and Daniel had shared countless late-night meals during Solar Wave's early days, the gas station where Lily had once insisted on buying a lottery ticket because she was feeling lucky, the small park where Daniel had taught her to ride a bike without training wheels. Every familiar landmark felt precious now, fragile, like something that could be taken away. Their house was dark except for the porch light Daniel always left on for her. Emma paid the driver and walked slowly up the path they'd re-bricked together last spring, past the garden where Lily's sunflowers were just starting to push through the soil. Everything looked the same, but Emma felt fundamentally changed, as if Ryan's threats had altered the molecular structure of her world. Daniel was waiting in the kitchen, reading a technical manual about battery storage systems, his reading glasses perched on his nose and a cup of herbal tea cooling beside him. He looked up when she entered, and Emma saw her own anxiety reflected in his blue eyes. "How bad?" he asked simply. Emma sank into the chair across from him, not bothering to remove her heels or her carefully applied makeup. "He wants her, Dan. Not just visitation. He wants to be her father." Daniel closed the manual, removed his glasses, and rubbed his eyes with the palms of his hands. For a moment he looked older than his 34 years, worn down by the weight of protecting a family that suddenly felt more fragile than either of them had realized. "What exactly did he say?" Emma repeated Ryan's words as precisely as she could remember them, watching Daniel's expression grow grimmer with each detail. When she finished, they sat in silence for a long moment, the kitchen clock ticking away seconds that felt like hours. "He can't just take her, can he?" Emma whispered finally. "I mean, you adopted her. You're her legal father. Step-parent adoption can be challenged if the biological father claims he wasn't properly notified," Daniel said quietly, his engineer's mind already working through the legal mechanics. "If Ryan can prove he didn't know about the adoption proceedings, but he abandoned her." Emma's voice cracked with exhaustion and fear. "He walked away when I was pregnant. He never paid child support, never sent a birthday card, never even acknowledged her existence." "I know." Daniel reached across the table and took her hands in his. "But the family court system, it's complicated. They tend to favor biological connections, especially when there's money involved, and Ryan Blake has a lot of money." Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes, tears of rage and frustration and bone-deep terror at the thought of losing the daughter who had been her anchor through every storm. "This isn't fair, Dan. Lily doesn't even know him. To her, you're her father. You're the one who reads her bedtime stories and helps with her homework and holds her when she has nightmares." "And I always will be," Daniel said fiercely. "No matter what happens legally, no matter what Ryan Blake thinks he can buy or manipulate, I will always be Lily's father, in every way that matters." Emma believed him. But she also knew that love and commitment weren't always enough to win battles fought. In courtrooms and legal briefs, her phone buzzed with a text message. Another unknown number, but the message made her blood run cold. "Enjoyed dinner. I'll be in touch with my attorney tomorrow. Give Lily my love. R." Emma showed Daniel the message, watching his jaw clench as he read it. "He doesn't even know her," Daniel said quietly. "He doesn't know that she's afraid of thunderstorms, but loves the sound of rain. He doesn't know that she puts ketchup on everything, even ice cream. He doesn't know that she wants to be an astronaut and an artist and a veterinarian all at the same time. But he's going to try to learn," Emma whispered, and suddenly she realized their peaceful life was about to become a battlefield. The legal documents arrived at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, delivered by a courier who looked apologetic about ruining someone's breakfast. Emma stood in her bathrobe at the front door, staring at the manila envelope marked "Urgent Legal Notice," as if it might burst into flames if she looked at it long enough. Behind her, she could hear Lily chattering to Daniel about her upcoming science fair project, their voices mixing with the familiar sounds of morning, coffee brewing, toast popping up, the local news murmuring from the kitchen radio. Normal sounds, safe sounds, sounds that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else's life. "Mama, who was at the door?" Lily called from the kitchen, her voice bright with the kind of curiosity that made Emma's heart clench. At 7 years old, Lily still believed the world was fundamentally good, that adults were trustworthy, that families stayed together simply because they loved each other. "Just a delivery, sweetheart," Emma managed, closing the door and leaning against it for support. Her hands shook as she tore open the envelope, though she already knew what she'd find inside. Petition for paternity, determination and custody modification. The words swam on the page, legal terminology that felt like a foreign language designed to steal children from their mothers. Emma skimmed the document, catching phrases that made her stomach turn. Biological father's rights, Best interests of the minor child. Substantial change in circumstances warranting review of current custody arrangement. Daniel appeared in the hallway, still wearing his pajama pants and the faded Northwestern University t-shirt he'd had since college. He took one look at Emma's face and understood immediately. "Lily, honey, can you go brush your teeth?" He called toward the kitchen. "We need to leave for school in 15 minutes. But I haven't finished my cereal." "Take it with you to the bathroom," Daniel said, his voice gentle but firm. "I know it sounds weird, but humor your old dad, okay?" Emma heard Lily's footsteps on the stairs, followed by the sound of her bedroom door closing. Only then did Daniel approach, his blue eyes dark with concern. "Is it bad?" he asked quietly. Emma handed him the papers without speaking. She watched his face as he read, seeing the progression of emotions. Surprise, anger, determination, and finally, a kind of grim acceptance that made her want to scream. "He's serious," Daniel said finally. "This isn't just a threat, he's actually filing for paternity rights." "Look at page 3, Emma whispered. Daniel flipped through the documents, and Emma saw the exact moment he found what had made her blood run cold. His jaw tightened, his knuckles went white where he gripped the papers. "Petition for joint custody," he read aloud, alleging that the minor child has been denied access to her biological father, and that this denial is detrimental to her emotional and psychological development. "He's trying to make me look like the villain," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper, "like I've been keeping Lily from him out of spite. Have you talked to a lawyer yet?" Emma shook her head. I hoped he was just trying to scare me. I didn't think he'd actually go through with it." Daniel set the papers on the hall table and pulled Emma into his arms. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her cheek, smell the familiar scent of his soap mixed with coffee and the faint motor oil that seemed permanently embedded in his skin. For a moment, she let herself pretend that his embrace could protect them from legal documents and court orders, and biological fathers who showed up 7 years too late. "We'll fight this," Daniel said into her hair. "Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we'll fight it. What if we lose?" The question came out smaller than Emma intended, like something a child might ask in the dark. "We won't," Daniel said, but Emma could hear the uncertainty he was trying to hide. "We won't, because Lily belongs with us, because we're her real family, no matter what any court document says." From upstairs came the sound of Lily singing to herself, some pop song she'd learned at school, her voice sweet and off-key and completely unconscious of the battle being waged over her future. Emma closed her eyes and tried to memorize the sound, storing it away against the possibility that their mornings might look very different soon. "Mama! Daddy Dan, I'm ready for school!" Lily called, her footsteps thundering down the stairs like a tiny stampede. Emma quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile as her daughter appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder, lunchbox dangling from her hand, curly hair escaping from the ponytail Emma had carefully arranged that morning. "How do I look?" Lily asked, spinning in place to show off her favorite dress, the purple one with silver stars that she insisted made her look like a space princess. "Beautiful," Emma said, and meant it, absolutely beautiful. But as they walked to the car, for the school drop-off, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was looking at her daughter through glass, still able to see her, but no longer able to touch her world with complete certainty. The papers in Daniel's hand felt like a countdown timer, ticking away the seconds until their family would be tested in ways Emma had never imagined. The family court attorney's office smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. Emma sat in a leather chair that had seen too many custody battles, staring at the wall of law books that surrounded Margaret Chen's desk, like a fortress of legal precedent. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd heard every sob story twice, spread Ryan's petition across her desk like she was laying out evidence at a crime scene. "He's good," Margaret said without preamble. "Whoever Ryan Blake hired knows exactly what they're doing. This petition hits every emotional button the family court system responds to." Emma felt Daniel's hand find hers in the space between their chairs, His palm was warm, steady, but she could feel the tension radiating through his fingers. They'd been sitting in this office for 30 minutes, and every piece of information Margaret shared felt like another nail in their coffin. "What does that mean exactly?" Daniel asked, his engineer's mind wanting concrete facts instead of legal abstractions. Margaret pulled out a yellow highlighter and began marking sections of the petition. "Look here, denied meaningful relationship with biological father. Here, child has been deliberately kept from knowing her paternal heritage. And this section, substantial financial resources available to provide enhanced educational and cultural opportunities." "He's saying we're poor," Emma said flatly. "Not poor, just less resource than a Blake family trust fund." Margaret's smile was grim. The court doesn't care about love, unfortunately. It cares about stability, resources, and what it perceives as the child's best interests. Ryan Blake can offer private schools, tutors, cultural experiences, college funds that most families can only dream about. Emma thought about their modest Westchester home, about the way they carefully budgeted for Lily's activities, about the college savings account they fed $25 at a time. Suddenly, everything that had felt like enough, more than enough, seemed inadequate. "But I adopted her," Daniel said, his voice carrying a note of desperation that made Emma's heart ache. "Doesn't that count for something?" "Step-parent adoptions can be challenged if the biological father claims he wasn't properly notified," Margaret explained gently. "Ryan's lawyers are arguing that he never received formal notification of the adoption proceedings and that his parental rights were terminated without due process. Because he abandoned her." Emma's voice cracked with frustration. "He walked away when I was pregnant. He never tried to contact us, never paid support, never—" "I know," Margaret interrupted, "but not unkindly. And we'll make that argument. But abandonment is harder to prove than you might think, especially when there's no formal custody order establishing his responsibilities. Without a legal framework, his absence could be interpreted as simply not knowing about his daughter." Emma felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. "You're saying he might win?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment, shuffling through papers with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd delivered bad news too many times. "I'm saying it's going to be a fight. Ryan Blake has resources, connections, and a legal team that specializes in exactly this kind of case. But we have something stronger." "What's that?" Daniel asked. "We have the truth. We have 7 years of documentation showing that you've been Lily's father in every way that matters. School records, medical records, photographs, witness testimony, from teachers and neighbors and friends. We have a little girl who calls you daddy and has never known any other father." Emma wanted to feel hopeful, but Margaret's tone suggested there were more obstacles ahead. "However," Margaret continued, "there's something else we need to discuss. The court is likely to order a custody evaluation. That means a social worker will interview all of you, Emma, Daniel, and Lily. They'll visit your home, speak with teachers, neighbors, anyone who knows your family situation. And Ryan," Daniel said grimly, "and Ryan. They'll assess his home environment, his lifestyle, his ability to provide for Lily. And then they'll make a recommendation to the judge about what arrangement they believe serves Lily's best interests." Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it instinctively, then felt the blood drain from her face. "Heard you got my lawyer's letter. Looking forward to meeting my daughter properly. Maybe we can arrange a supervised visit soon. I think she'd enjoy seeing how the other half lives." Our Emma showed the message to Daniel and Margaret watching. Both their faces darken as they read it. "He's confident," Margaret observed. "That level of confidence usually comes from knowing something we don't." "Like what?" Emma asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying Emma with those sharp eyes. "Like having inside information about how these cases typically go. Like having connections in the family court system. Like having enough money to make problems disappear." Emma felt the walls of the office closing in around her. Outside, she could hear the sounds of downtown White Plains. Traffic, sirens, people going about their normal lives while hers fell apart in increments. "What do we do?" she whispered. Margaret's smile was fierce, determined. We fight like hell, and we pray that love is enough to tip the scales. But as they left the attorney's office, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were David facing Goliath. And this time, Goliath had better lawyers. She never thought she'd have to explain to her 7-year-old daughter why a stranger was coming to meet her. Emma sat on Lily's bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and art supplies scattered across Star Wars bedsheets, trying to find words for something that had no good explanation. Through the window, she could see Daniel in their driveway, nervously, adjusting the solar panels on their roof for the 3rd time that morning. His way of dealing with anxiety when there was nothing else he could fix. "So this man, he's like my other daddy?" Lily asked, her honey-colored eyes wide with confusion. She was cross-legged on her bed, unconsciously braiding the hair of her favorite doll, a raggedy thing named Princess Sparkles that Daniel had won for her at a county fair 2 summers ago. "Not like Daddy Dan," Emma said carefully, the words feeling like broken glass in her throat. "This man, his name is Ryan, and he knew me before you were born. Before I met Daddy Dan." Lily frowned, the way she did when her 2nd-grade math homework didn't make sense. "But why does he want to meet me now? Where was he when I was little?" The questions were innocent, logical, devastating. Emma had been dreading them for a week, ever since the court-mandated supervisor had called to schedule this initial meeting. How do you explain abandonment to a child who's never known anything but unconditional love? "Sometimes adults make mistakes," Emma said finally. "Sometimes they think they want one thing, but then they realize they want something different. Like when I thought I wanted a pony, but then I realized I really just wanted riding lessons. Something like that, sweetheart." But even as Emma said it, she knew the comparison was inadequate. Lily's childhood wants were innocent, changeable, harmless. Ryan's adult choices had consequences that rippled through generations. The doorbell rang and Emma felt her stomach clench. Through Lily's window, she could see a black BMW parked at the curb, sleek, expensive, foreign in their neighborhood of minivans and pickup trucks. Ryan was early, of course. Punctuality had always been one of his weapons, a way of controlling situations before they began. "Is that him?" Lily whispered, suddenly shy in the way children become when they sense adult tension they don't understand. "Yes, baby. But remember, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, okay? If you feel scared or uncomfortable, you just tell me or Daddy Dan and we'll take care of it." Lily nodded solemnly, but Emma could see the curiosity flickering in her eyes. At 7, the world was still full of mysteries to solve, adults to figure out, new experiences to catalog. She had no way of knowing that some mysteries were better left unsolved. Downstairs, Emma could hear Daniel answering the door, his voice, carefully polite but strained. Then Ryan's voice, smoother, more confident, carrying the kind of easy authority that money and privilege bred. And finally, the court supervisor, a woman named Janet Rodriguez, who specialized in these delicate first meetings between children and long-absent parents. "Mama," Lily said quietly, "will you stay with me the whole time?" "Every single second," Emma promised, kissing the top of her daughter's curly head. "I'm not going anywhere." They walked downstairs together, Lily's small hand gripping Emma's fingers tightly. In the living room, Ryan stood near the mantelpiece, studying the family photographs that chronicled 7 years of life without him. Pictures of Lily's first steps, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays, all the moments he'd chosen to miss, now displayed like evidence of a life he'd never been part of. He turned when they entered, and Emma watched his face carefully. She saw surprise first. Lily was taller than he'd expected, more grown up, more formed. Then something that might have been recognition, as he took in the honey-colored eyes that matched her own, the stubborn set of her jaw that was purely Emma's, the way she stood close to her mother with unconscious loyalty. "Hello, Lily," Ryan said, his voice gentler than Emma had heard it in years. "I'm Ryan. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Lily studied him with the frank curiosity of childhood, taking in his expensive suit, his perfect hair, the way he stood like someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Are you really my daddy?" she asked directly, the way children do when adults are dancing around the truth. Ryan's smile was careful, practiced. "I'm your biological father, yes. That means we share the same DNA, the same family history. Would you like to know about your grandparents, your cousins, the family you've never met?" Emma felt something cold settle in her chest. This was Ryan's strategy, not to replace Daniel, but to offer Lily something she'd never had. A connection to a larger world, a family history, roots that extended beyond their small suburban life. And Emma could see, with growing horror, that Lily was interested. "Do I have cousins?" Lily asked, stepping slightly away from Emma's side. "How old are they? Do they like art?" "You have 3 cousins," Ryan said, sitting down to bring himself to Lily's eye level. "Madison is 9, Trevor is 8, and little Sophie just turned 6. And yes, Madison loves to paint, just like you, I imagine." Emma watched her daughter's face light up with the kind of excitement that came from discovering you weren't as alone in the world as you'd thought. And in that moment, Emma realized that Ryan Blake wasn't just fighting for custody. He was fighting for Lily's heart. And he might actually win. The custody evaluation report arrived on the same day Lily lost her first tooth. Emma found her daughter in the bathroom at 6 a.m., staring at herself in the mirror with wide, worried eyes and a tiny white tooth cupped in her palm like a pearl. Blood dotted her lower lip, but Lily wasn't crying about the tooth. She was crying because she'd heard her parents arguing in hushed voices through their bedroom wall. "Mama," Lily whispered, "are you and Daddy Dan getting divorced?" The question hit Emma like a physical blow. "No, sweetheart. No, we're not getting divorced. We're dealing with some grown-up problems. But Daddy Dan and I love each other very much." "Is it because of the man who says he's my other daddy?" Emma knelt beside her daughter, looking at their reflection in the bathroom mirror. 2 faces with the same honey-colored eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same worried expression that shouldn't belong on a 7-year-old's face. "Yes," Emma said quietly, because Lily deserved honesty even when the truth was complicated. "It's because of Ryan." Lily studied her lost tooth thoughtfully. "Will the tooth fairy still come if my family's broken?" "Our family isn't broken, baby. It's just being tested." But even as Emma said the words, she could feel the weight of the custody evaluation report downstairs on the kitchen table, sealed in an envelope that contained their future. Margaret Chen had called at midnight, never a good sign, to warn them that the recommendation was mixed and that they needed to discuss next steps immediately. Downstairs, Daniel was making pancakes with the focused intensity he brought to everything when he was trying not to fall apart. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and maple syrup, like Saturday mornings and safety, like everything they stood to lose. "Morning, Princess Tooth Fairy," Daniel said when he saw Lily, managing a smile despite the dark circles under his eyes. "I heard you have something special for under your pillow tonight." Lily showed him the tooth, then climbed into her usual chair at the kitchen table. "Daddy Dan, if I have to go live with Ryan sometimes, will you still be my daddy?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Emma watched Daniel's face carefully, seeing him struggle to find words that were both honest and reassuring. "Nothing will ever change how much I love you," Daniel said finally. "Nothing will ever change the fact that you're my daughter. Not court papers, not other people's opinions, not anything, do you understand?" Lily nodded, but Emma could see the confusion in her eyes. At 7, love was supposed to be simple, permanent, unbreakable. The idea that adults could argue about where children belonged was as foreign as quantum physics. The phone rang. Margaret Chen, right on schedule. "Emma." The attorney's voice was carefully neutral. "We need to talk. Can you come to my office this morning?" "How bad?" Emma asked, though she already knew from Margaret's tone. "Bring Daniel, bring tissues, and bring your checkbook because we're going to appeal this recommendation." After Emma hung up, she and Daniel stood in their kitchen surrounded by the debris of their normal life. Lily's backpack by the door, Daniel's coffee mug still warm, on the counter, the custody evaluation envelope that contained words that could tear their family apart. "What does appeal mean?" Lily asked, because children have excellent hearing when adults think they're not listening. Emma looked at Daniel, then back at their daughter. It was time for the conversation they'd been dreading. Time to tell Lily that the adults couldn't agree about where she belonged. Time to explain that sometimes love wasn't enough to keep families together. But before Emma could speak, Daniel sat down at the table across from Lily, his blue eyes serious but gentle. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "when adults disagree about important things, they ask a judge to help them decide what's best. But no matter what any judge says, no matter what any piece of paper says, you will always be loved. By me, by your mama, completely, and forever." "And by Ryan too?" Lily asked quietly. Emma felt her heart crack a little more. "Yes, sweetheart. Ryan loves you too, in his own way." "Then why is everyone so sad?" It was such a simple question, such a child's logic. If everyone loved her, why couldn't they just share? Why did love have to be a competition with winners and losers? Emma sat down at the table, completing their triangle, and looked at her daughter, this miraculous little person who had never asked to be the center of a custody battle, who just wanted to paint pictures and ride her bike and believed that the adults in her life would keep her safe. "Because sometimes," Emma said slowly, "adults have to make really hard decisions about what's best for the people they love. And sometimes they disagree about what best means." Lily considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "Can I help decide?" Emma and Daniel exchanged glances. It was exactly the question the family court would ask. What did Lily want? Where did she feel most at home? Who did she consider her real father? "Maybe," Emma said, "maybe you can help the judge understand what makes you happy." Lily nodded solemnly, then brightened as she remembered something important. "Will you put my tooth under my pillow, even if we have to go to court?" "Absolutely," Daniel said. The tooth fairy doesn't care about custody battles. And in that moment, Emma realized something that gave her the first real hope she'd felt in weeks. Ryan Blake could offer Lily money, private schools, a connection to his family's legacy, but he couldn't offer her this, the kind of love that showed up at 6 a.m. for lost teeth and custody evaluations and all the messy, imperfect, beautiful moments that made a family real. The evaluation report could say whatever it wanted. Emma was done being afraid. The morning light filtered through the kitchen window differently now, softer somehow, as if even the sun understood that this house had weathered storms and emerged stronger. Emma stood at the sink washing the breakfast dishes while watching Lily and Daniel in the backyard through the window above the faucet. Her daughter, now 9, taller, more confident, was explaining something animated about photosynthesis to Daniel, using their sunflower garden as a visual aid. Daniel listened with the same patient attention he'd always given her, asking questions that made Lily's face light up with the joy of being truly heard. The custody battle had lasted 8 months. 8 months of court dates and psychological evaluations, of lawyers and supervised visits, of nights when Emma lay awake wondering if love would be enough. Ryan had fought with all the resources at his disposal, private investigators who documented every aspect of their family life, expert witnesses who testified about the benefits of biological connections, financial analysts who outlined the educational advantages his wealth could provide. But in the end, it hadn't been enough. Not because the judge was swayed by emotion over evidence, but because Lily herself had found her voice. In the quiet of the judge's chambers, with no lawyers or court reporters present, 9-year-old Lily Carter Scott had spoken with the clarity that sometimes comes from children who've been forced to grow up too quickly. "Ryan is nice," she had told Judge Martinez, "and I like having cousins and learning about where my eyes came from. But home is where somebody knows you put ketchup on everything and reads you stories, even when you're too old for them, and holds your hand during thunderstorms. Home is Daddy Dan making pancakes and Mama singing off-key in the car. Ryan can visit, but home is home." The judge had awarded Ryan visitation rights, 2 weekends a month and alternating holidays. It wasn't what he'd wanted, but it was what the court deemed in the child's best interests. And slowly, carefully, they'd all learned to navigate this new configuration of family. Ryan had surprised them. Away from the courtroom's adversarial atmosphere, stripped of his lawyer's aggressive strategies, he'd proven capable of something Emma hadn't expected: growth. He still arrived in expensive cars and took Lily to places Daniel and Emma couldn't afford, but he'd also learned to ask about her art projects and remember which books she was reading. He'd stopped trying to compete with Daniel and started trying to find his own place in Lily's expanding world. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still conversations that required careful navigation. But there was peace now, the kind that comes from battles fought honestly and decisions made with children's welfare truly at heart. Emma dried her hands on the kitchen towel and stepped outside to join her family. Lily was now digging in the dirt, showing Daniel how the root systems worked, her hands muddy and her face streaked with soil. "Mama," Lily called out when she saw her. "Did you know that sunflowers can grow 20 feet tall if they have enough support?" "I did not know that," Emma said, settling on the grass beside them. 20 feet seems impossible." "Not impossible," Daniel corrected gently, wrapping an arm around Emma's shoulders. "Just requires the right conditions. Good soil, plenty of sunlight, and roots strong enough to support the growth." Lily nodded seriously. "And someone to water them when they can't reach the rain." Emma looked at her daughter, this remarkable, little person who'd somehow managed to weather an adult storm with more grace than the adults involved, and felt something settle deep in her chest. Not the absence of fear exactly, but the presence of something stronger, the knowledge that they'd built something real, something that could bend without breaking, something that could grow even in difficult conditions. Her phone buzzed with a text message, a photo from Ryan showing Lily and her cousin Madison at the Natural History Museum, both girls grinning widely in front of a dinosaur exhibit. The message read, "Thank you for sharing her with me. See you Sunday at 6. Emma showed the photo to Daniel, watching his face soften as he saw Lily's happiness. This too was growth, learning that love wasn't diminished by being shared, that Lily's world could expand without their own shrinking. "She's going to be okay," Daniel said quietly, understanding Emma's thoughts without needing explanation. "More than okay. She's going to be extraordinary." Emma leaned into her husband's warmth, watching their daughter explore the mysteries of photosynthesis with the same focused intensity she brought to everything that captured her interest. 9 years old and already understanding that growth required both roots and light, support and space to reach toward something bigger. In the distance, a neighbor's lawnmower hummed a familiar suburban melody. Cars passed on their quiet street, carrying families to soccer games and grocery stores and all the ordinary destinations that made up the rhythm of weekend life. The world moved forward as it always did, indifferent to the small dramas and large loves that shaped individual lives. But here, in this backyard, in this moment, Emma Carter Scott had everything she'd ever really wanted. A daughter who knew she was loved completely. A husband who understood that family was something you built rather than something you inherited, and the hard-won peace that came from fighting for what mattered and winning not through conquest, but through grace. The sunflowers would grow 20 feet tall this summer, reaching toward the light with roots strong enough to support their impossible height. Just like her daughter, just like her family, just like her own heart, which had learned to bloom again after being broken, stronger and more beautiful than before. Would you have had the courage to fight for your family the way Emma did? What do you think you would have done in her place? Chosen safety or chosen to stand and fight? Your participation in our channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.